I met him once at a roadside diner in Arizona. He didn't give me a name, just said, "You can call me Mr. Brown." He looked like any tired man who'd been digging holes all his life, except he wasn't. He was the gardener who stole $48 million in gold, cash, and cryptocurrency from one of the most violent cartel bosses in the Western Hemisphere. And he did it with a wheelbarrow, a tarp, and a truck full of flower pots. This is not fiction. This is real. And if you're watching this, he probably wants you to know exactly how he did it. Before we jump in, do me one favor. Hit the subscribe button, smash the like, and comment below what state you're watching from. This is one of the wildest stories I've ever investigated, and trust me, you'll want to stick around till the end. At exactly 3:47 a.m. on a moonless Saturday night in October, a modified gardening truck pulled through the service gate of the most secure private estate in Malibu. The driver wore the same dirt-stained work clothes he'd worn for 2 years, carried the same weathered tools, and followed the same route through the meticulously maintained gardens. But tonight was different. Tonight, that truck would leave carrying $48 million in cartel money. The estate belonged to Ricardo Montoya, a businessman who made his real fortune as the American operations chief for the Hermanos del Oro cartel. Hidden beneath the property's elaborate garden system was a sophisticated bunker containing enough money and gold to fund small wars. The timing was perfect because Ricardo and his entire security team were attending a celebration in Las Vegas. An elaborate setup designed to remove every potential witness from the estate for exactly 6 hours. Mr. Brown had been planning this moment for 18 months, ever since he accidentally discovered the underground vault while installing a new irrigation system. The vault was accessible through a concealed entrance hidden beneath a decorative fountain in the mansion's central courtyard. The fountain operated on a hydraulic system that could lower into the ground, revealing a staircase to the underground facility. Multiple security layers protected it, including biometric scanners, motion detectors, and armed guards monitoring 24 hours daily. But Mr. Brown's position as head gardener had given him access to information that even Ricardo's most trusted associates didn't possess. He knew about backup power systems, emergency exits, and most importantly, the weekly maintenance schedules that briefly disabled certain security measures. Mr. Brown had spent months studying the vault's security systems while conducting normal gardening duties. He learned that motion detectors were calibrated to ignore small animals and wind-blown vegetation. He also discovered that biometric scanners had a backup system activated using emergency codes known only to Ricardo and his security chief. The breakthrough came when Mr. Brown overheard a conversation about updating the vault's access codes. He learned the emergency codes were based on coordinates from Ricardo's hometown in Mexico. After weeks of research, he identified the exact location and calculated the coordinates that served as emergency access codes. Mr. Brown's technical preparation included purchasing advanced electronic equipment that could detect and temporarily disable security cameras without triggering alerts. He also acquired tools that could bypass electronic locks and override hydraulic systems controlling vault access. The most challenging aspect was creating a plausible explanation for removing large quantities of material from the estate without arousing suspicion. He solved this by establishing Garden Eco Disposal, a legitimate waste management company specializing in removing organic material from high-end properties. The company provided official documentation explaining his presence during unusual hours. He had been using this system for months to remove normal garden waste, establishing a pattern that would make his final trip appear completely routine. The theft began at 3:15 a.m. when Mr. Brown disabled security cameras using an electromagnetic pulse device hidden in his gardening equipment. The device created a brief power surge, forcing cameras to restart, creating a 12-minute window during which he could access the vault without being recorded. Using emergency coordinates to bypass biometric scanners, he descended into the underground facility. The vault contained exactly what he expected: millions in cash bundled for transport, gold bars marked with cartel symbols, and sophisticated computer equipment managing cryptocurrency accounts worth tens of millions. Mr. Brown worked with practiced efficiency, loading bundle after bundle of cash into specially modified containers that appeared to contain garden waste but actually held millions in cartel money. The containers were designed to pass casual inspection while concealing their true contents. The gold bars presented a challenge because of their weight and distinctive appearance. He solved this by placing gold in containers filled with soil and plant material that disguised both weight and metallic appearance. He had tested this concealment method extensively using lead weights to simulate gold's density. The cryptocurrency component required accessing Ricardo's computer systems and transferring digital assets to accounts he had prepared in advance. After months of learning about cryptocurrency security, he had created multiple digital wallets using sophisticated anonymization techniques, making transfers virtually impossible to trace. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 minutes in the vault accessing computer systems while security patrols continued above ground. Using a radio scanner, he monitored guards' movements and tracked their communications to anticipate patrol routes. He successfully transferred over $15 million in cryptocurrency to his prepared accounts before beginning removal of physical assets. The digital transfers were conducted using Ricardo's own computer systems and authentication codes, making them appear legitimate. The final phase involved restoring the vault to its original appearance and ensuring security systems would resume normal operation without revealing evidence of unauthorized access. He replaced emptied containers with identical ones filled with worthless material, maintaining the vault's original appearance. By 5:30 a.m., Mr. Brown had loaded $48 million into his modified gardening truck and was driving away using the same route he had followed hundreds of times during legitimate work. To any observer, he appeared to be conducting routine waste removal services. But the man who drove away from Ricardo Montoya's estate that morning would never exist again. In his place would emerge a ghost who had outwitted one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. His real name was Miguel Santos, a 43-year-old immigrant from Guatemala who had built a successful gardening business through 15 years of hard work. Miguel specialized in designing and maintaining elaborate garden systems for high-end properties throughout Southern California. Miguel's life had been marked by personal tragedy. His wife Maria had been killed in a car accident caused by a drunk driver who was later revealed to be the son of a wealthy businessman with connections to corrupt officials. The driver received only a minimal sentence despite clear evidence of guilt, leaving Miguel bitter about a justice system that protected the rich while ignoring ordinary people's suffering. His daughter Isabella had been 12 when her mother died, and the trauma affected her deeply. Isabella struggled with depression and anxiety, requiring expensive therapy and medication that strained Miguel's finances, despite his successful business. The transformation began when Miguel was hired to redesign the garden system at Ricardo Montoya's Malibu estate. The contract was worth over $200,000 for complete renovation of the property's landscaping, the largest of Miguel's career. Initial meetings with Ricardo were conducted through intermediaries who explained their employer was a private businessman who valued discretion and preferred avoiding direct contact with service providers. Miguel was told Ricardo traveled extensively and would rarely be present during landscaping work. The estate covered over 15 acres and included elaborate water features, rare plants from around the world, and sophisticated irrigation systems costing millions to install. Miguel realized he was working for someone with virtually unlimited financial resources and very specific ideas about security and privacy. Miguel's first indication something unusual was happening came during his initial property survey. Certain garden areas were off-limits and maintained by a separate crew working only at night. The estate's security was far more sophisticated than normal for even the wealthiest private residents. Security measures included multiple layers of electronic surveillance, armed guards patrolling grounds 24 hours daily, and restricted access zones requiring special authorization. Miguel realized his employer was either extremely paranoid about personal security or involved in activities requiring protection from serious threats. The most obvious clue was constant streams of expensive vehicles arriving during late-night hours. Miguel observed luxury cars with license plates from multiple states in Mexico, all carrying well-dressed individuals conducting important business meetings. These were not social visits, but organized gatherings with specific purposes. The breakthrough in Miguel's understanding came during work on the property's elaborate irrigation system. Installing new water lines near the mansion's central courtyard, he discovered the decorative fountain wasn't actually connected to the property's water supply. Instead, it operated on a separate hydraulic system, serving no decorative purpose. Miguel's engineering curiosity led him to investigate the fountain's hydraulic system more thoroughly. When he accidentally activated the system during investigation, he found himself looking down into an underground facility, clearly not designed for storing garden supplies. The underground space was large enough to hold several vehicles and equipped with sophisticated lighting, ventilation, and security systems. Miguel could see metal containers, electronic equipment, and office furniture arranged in the subterranean facility. He realized he had discovered a secret bunker completely hidden from anyone who didn't know about the fountain's true purpose. Miguel's discovery put him in an extremely dangerous position because he now possessed knowledge about Ricardo's operation that could cost his life if the wrong people learned about it. Secret underground facilities weren't used for legitimate business purposes, and he had stumbled onto something powerful people would eliminate witnesses to protect. Miguel began conducting discreet surveillance of the estate's activities while continuing legitimate landscaping work. Using his position as head gardener, he observed patterns of activity around the fountain and identified times when the underground facility was accessed by Ricardo and his associates. Surveillance revealed the hidden facility was used as a storage and processing center for enormous quantities of cash, precious metals, and other valuable assets. Miguel observed Ricardo's associates bringing sealed containers into the facility and removing different containers appearing to contain processed materials ready for transport. Miguel realized he was witnessing a sophisticated money laundering operation, processing millions of dollars for what was obviously a major criminal organization. The underground facility represented the nerve center of a criminal empire generating enormous profits through illegal activities. Miguel's moral struggle was complicated by knowledge that the same type of criminal organization that corrupted the justice system in his wife's case was now operating literally beneath his feet. Miguel felt fate had placed him in position to strike back against forces that destroyed his family while providing resources necessary to secure Isabella's future. Miguel spent months developing understanding of the underground facility's security systems and operational procedures. Using legitimate access to the property, he conducted reconnaissance impossible for any outside investigator. He mapped the facility's layout, identified vulnerabilities, and learned activity patterns allowing him to plan a successful theft. Miguel spent 14 months transforming from honest gardener into sophisticated criminal, capable of executing one of the most audacious thefts in cartel history. This transformation required developing new skills, establishing false identities, and creating elaborate systems allowing him to steal $48 million while leaving no trace. Miguel's first challenge was gaining detailed knowledge about the underground facility necessary for planning successful theft. He needed to understand security systems, storage procedures, and operational patterns, allowing vault access without detection by Ricardo's sophisticated surveillance network. His position as estate's head gardener provided legitimate reasons to work throughout the property at various hours, giving opportunities to observe facility operations without arousing suspicion. Miguel began keeping detailed notes about guard rotations, security procedures, and timing of activities involving underground vault access. Miguel discovered the facility was most vulnerable during monthly maintenance periods when certain security systems were temporarily disabled for equipment testing and updates. These maintenance windows lasted exactly 4 hours and occurred during predetermined dates known to only a few organization members. Miguel's technical education was limited, but he began studying electronic security systems and computer networks through online courses and technical manuals purchased using cash to avoid creating paper trails. His learning curve was steep, but motivation and intelligence allowed him to master concepts normally requiring years of formal training. Study of security systems revealed even the most sophisticated networks had vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with sufficient knowledge and preparation. Miguel learned about electromagnetic pulse devices, temporarily disabling electronic equipment, and social engineering techniques, gathering information from unsuspecting targets. Miguel's biggest challenge was developing technical skills necessary to bypass biometric scanners and electronic locks protecting underground facility access. He studied specific models of equipment Ricardo used and learned about vulnerabilities through technical forums and underground websites discussing security system weaknesses. Miguel discovered biometric scanners used at the estate had backup systems activated using emergency codes based on predetermined algorithms. He spent weeks researching Ricardo's background and personal history to identify information that might generate these emergency codes. Research revealed Ricardo was intensely proud of his hometown in Mexico and often referenced its geographical coordinates in casual conversations and business communications. Miguel realized these coordinates might serve as basis for emergency access codes and began testing various combinations until he identified the correct sequence. Preparation also required establishing false identities in legitimate business operations providing cover for theft activities. Miguel created Garden Eco Disposal as legitimate waste management company specializing in removing organic material from high-end properties throughout Southern California. The waste management company required obtaining official licenses, insurance policies, and business registrations, allowing operation of large vehicles on private properties and transport of substantial material loads without attracting law enforcement attention. Miguel used savings to purchase necessary equipment and documentation for his cover business. The cover business provided legitimate reasons to bring specialized vehicles onto the estate and remove large quantities of material during unusual hours. Miguel had been using this system for months to remove normal garden waste, establishing patterns making his final theft appear completely routine to casual observers. Financial preparation was as important as operational planning because he needed to convert stolen assets into forms that couldn't be traced or recovered by law enforcement agencies. Miguel researched cryptocurrency systems, offshore banking networks, and precious metals markets, allowing him to secure assets after theft. Study of money laundering techniques taught him about the importance of moving stolen assets through multiple transactions and jurisdictions to make them virtually impossible to trace. Miguel established relationships with currency exchange services and precious metals dealers operating in legal gray areas, asking few questions about clients' asset sources. Miguel also created multiple false identities backed by sophisticated documentation, allowing him to disappear completely after theft. Using contacts in the immigrant community, he obtained high-quality false papers, passing most forms of official inspection. Miguel tested these identities extensively, ensuring they would support his cover story if questioned by authorities. Psychological preparation was perhaps the most challenging aspect because he was preparing to commit crimes, making him a fugitive for life. Miguel struggled with knowledge his actions would force him to abandon his relationship with Isabella and disappear from her life permanently. Internal conflict was resolved when Isabella's therapy revealed she blamed herself for her mother's death and was developing suicidal thoughts that terrified Miguel. He realized his daughter needed resources he couldn't provide through legitimate means, and that stealing from Ricardo might be the only way to ensure Isabella's survival and recovery. Final motivation came when he learned Ricardo's organization was expanding into drug distribution networks, targeting schools and communities throughout Southern California. Miguel realized his theft could disrupt these operations and potentially save lives by forcing the cartel to redirect resources toward security rather than expansion. 1 month before executing his theft, Miguel made a discovery that would prove crucial to his operation's success. While conducting routine maintenance on estate security cameras, Miguel overheard a conversation between Ricardo and his head of security, revealing existence of a corruption network extending far beyond the estate's boundaries. Miguel learned Ricardo had spent years systematically corrupting law enforcement officials, government inspectors, and private security personnel who might pose threats to his operations. This corruption network included local police officers, federal agents, and even judges compromised through bribes, threats, or blackmail. The conversation revealed Ricardo's security chief, Carlos Vega, maintained detailed files on every corrupted official, including information about their personal lives, financial vulnerabilities, and specific services they provided to the cartel. Miguel realized this information could be extremely valuable for planning his escape after theft. Miguel's position as a state gardener allowed him to observe meetings between Ricardo's associates and their law enforcement contacts. Miguel witnessed several occasions when uniformed police officers visited the estate during unofficial hours to receive payments and instructions from cartel representatives. Miguel also observed sophisticated communication systems Ricardo used to coordinate with corrupted contacts throughout Southern California. The estate's communications center included encrypted radio equipment, secure telephone lines, and computer systems that couldn't be monitored by conventional law enforcement surveillance methods. Discovery of the corruption network explained how Ricardo had operated his money laundering facility for years without detection by federal investigations. Miguel realized Ricardo possessed advance warning about law enforcement activities and could take defensive measures whenever official investigations approached his operations. The corruption network also included private security companies providing services to wealthy clients throughout the region. Miguel learned several of these companies were actually controlled by Ricardo's organization and used to gather intelligence about potential targets and provide security for cartel operations disguised as legitimate business activities. Miguel's most important discovery was that the corruption network included technicians who serviced security systems for high-end properties throughout Southern California. These technicians could disable or modify security systems without triggering alarms, giving the cartel access to detailed information about their competitors and potential targets. This discovery led Miguel to identify Thomas Chen, a security system technician who had been compromised by Ricardo's organization and was being used to gather intelligence about wealthy clients throughout the region. Miguel realized Thomas could be manipulated into assisting with the theft, without understanding his role in the operation. Miguel convinced Thomas he was conducting an independent investigation into Ricardo's activities and needed technical assistance to gather evidence that could expose the cartel's operations. Miguel offered Thomas substantial payments for helping to temporarily disable security systems during what Miguel claimed would be a surveillance operation. Thomas agreed to assist Miguel without understanding he was actually helping to plan one of the largest cartel thefts in American history. Thomas provided detailed technical information about the estate's security systems and agreed to create temporary disruptions, allowing Miguel to access the underground facility without detection. 3 days after stealing $48 million from Ricardo's underground vault, Miguel was driving through Nevada desert using an identity that had never existed and following an escape route he had spent months preparing. The man who had once been known as a simple gardener had transformed into a ghost who understood how to disappear completely. Miguel's escape began immediately after loading stolen money into his modified gardening truck and leaving the Malibu estate through the same service gate he had used hundreds of times during legitimate work. His first priority was reaching a secure location where he could transfer stolen assets to vehicles and storage facilities that couldn't be connected to his former identity. Miguel drove directly to a warehouse facility in Riverside that he had rented under one of his false identities 3 months before the theft. The warehouse was located in an industrial district where unusual activity during late-night hours wouldn't attract attention from neighbors or law enforcement patrols. The warehouse contained specialized equipment Miguel had purchased for processing and concealing large quantities of cash, gold, and electronic devices. Miguel had spent weeks preparing secure storage containers, protecting stolen assets during transport, while making them invisible to casual inspection. Miguel's first task was converting physical cash into forms easier to transport and more difficult to trace. Using currency counting machines and vacuum sealing equipment, he repackaged stolen money into compact bundles that could be hidden within seemingly legitimate cargo. Gold bars presented unique challenges because of their weight and distinctive appearance. Miguel solved these problems by melting down larger bars into smaller pieces that could be disguised as industrial materials or craft supplies. Miguel had practiced these procedures extensively and was able to process millions of dollars worth of gold in just a few hours. Miguel's most complex task was securing cryptocurrency assets he had stolen from Ricardo's computer systems. Using sophisticated software and multiple proxy servers, he transferred digital assets through a series of anonymous accounts, making them virtually impossible to trace or recover. By dawn on the day after theft, Miguel had successfully processed all stolen assets and loaded them into 3 different vehicles, transporting them to secure storage locations throughout the American Southwest. Miguel had created multiple backup plans, allowing him to access his money even if some primary storage sites were discovered and compromised. Miguel's escape route took him through sparsely populated areas of Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, where surveillance was minimal and law enforcement presence was limited. Miguel had studied these routes extensively and identified safe houses, supply caches, and alternative transportation options, allowing him to adapt to unexpected challenges. Miguel's most dangerous moment came when he encountered a routine police checkpoint on a highway outside Las Vegas. His false identification was sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection, but he was carrying documentation for his waste management business that might attract suspicion if examined too closely by experienced officers. Miguel's military-style planning proved invaluable during this encounter. He had prepared detailed cover stories for every aspect of his business operations and practiced his responses to potential questions until they became automatic. Miguel's calm demeanor and professional appearance convinced officers he was exactly what he appeared to be, a legitimate businessman traveling for work purposes. Miguel accelerated his travel schedule and reached his first secure storage facility in Arizona 18 hours ahead of his original timeline. Miguel transferred approximately 1/3 of his stolen assets to this location before continuing toward his ultimate destination in New Mexico. Miguel's second storage facility was located on a remote ranch he had purchased using false documentation and cryptocurrency payments that couldn't be traced to his real identity. The ranch provided complete privacy and security, while he completed the final phase of his asset conversion and identity transformation. Miguel spent 1 week at the ranch converting his remaining physical assets into forms suitable for international transport. His plan was to eventually relocate to a country that didn't have extradition treaties with the United States, but he wanted to establish himself in Central America before making final decisions about his ultimate destination. Miguel's transformation into Mr. Brown was completed during his stay at the ranch. Using professional-grade makeup and prosthetics, he altered his appearance significantly and practiced adopting mannerisms and speech patterns that would make him unrecognizable to anyone who had known him as Miguel Santos. Miguel also destroyed all physical evidence that could connect him to his former identity. He burned documents, disposed of personal items, and eliminated any traces of his previous life that might be discovered by investigators. Miguel understood his survival depended on the complete erasure of Miguel Santos in the birth of Mr. Brown. Discovery of Miguel's theft triggered the largest and most sophisticated manhunt in cartel history, as Ricardo marshaled resources from across his criminal empire to locate the man who had dared to steal from his personal vault. Within hours of discovering the missing $48 million, Ricardo had activated networks of corrupted officials, private investigators, and cartel operatives across 3 countries. Ricardo's initial assumption was that his theft had been conducted by a rival cartel or rogue government agency with access to sophisticated intelligence and military resources. The precision of the operation and complete absence of physical evidence suggested professional criminals with extensive training and unlimited financial backing. The investigation began with systematic review of everyone who had access to the estate during months preceding the theft. Ricardo's security chief, Carlos Vega, compiled detailed files on every employee, contractor, and visitor who had been present on the property, looking for connections to rival organizations or suspicious behavior patterns. Miguel Santos appeared on this list as the estate's head gardener, but initial analysis suggested he was an unlikely suspect for such a sophisticated crime. Miguel's background check revealed a clean criminal record, stable employment history, and no obvious connections to criminal organizations. Carlos's investigation took a different direction when he discovered Miguel's waste management company had been removing substantial quantities of material from the estate during weeks preceding the theft. Carlos realized this legitimate business activity could have provided perfect cover for planning and executing a major robbery. Carlos ordered detailed forensic analysis of Miguel's business operations and discovered Garden Eco Disposal had been established just 18 months earlier, coinciding with the period when Miguel had begun working at the estate. The company's financial records showed unusual patterns of equipment purchases and vehicle modifications, excessive for a small landscaping business. The breakthrough came when Carlos discovered Miguel had purchased sophisticated electronic equipment using his business accounts. The equipment included electromagnetic pulse devices, electronic lockpicks, and computer hardware that had no legitimate use in gardening operations. Carlos realized Miguel had been planning his theft for over a year while maintaining his cover as an honest gardener. Carlos's discovery triggered immediate escalation in the manhunt, as Ricardo realized he had been systematically deceived by someone he had trusted with access to his most sensitive operations. Ricardo was furious that his security protocols had been defeated by a simple gardener, and was determined to make Miguel pay with extreme suffering before death. The search for Miguel began with raids on his known addresses and business locations, but investigators found Miguel had abandoned all of his previous identities and had disappeared completely. Miguel's apartment was empty, his business equipment had been sold, and his financial accounts had been closed. Ricardo's investigators discovered Miguel had been using false identification documents and had established multiple backup identities, allowing him to disappear without leaving traces that could be followed by conventional investigative methods. Miguel's escape planning had been as sophisticated as his theft operation. The investigation expanded to include surveillance of Miguel's daughter Isabella, who was attending therapy sessions in Los Angeles and appeared to have no knowledge of her father's criminal activities. Ricardo's operatives monitored Isabella's communications and followed her daily activities, hoping Miguel would attempt to contact his daughter and reveal his location. Ricardo's frustration with the failed investigation led him to expand his search into areas normally outside his organization's capabilities. Ricardo hired private investigation firms, cybersecurity specialists, and former intelligence operatives who possessed resources and expertise exceeding those of most law enforcement agencies. The death of security technician Thomas Chen convinced Ricardo that Miguel was not working alone, and that the theft had been planned by a sophisticated criminal organization with resources to eliminate witnesses and cover their tracks. Ricardo began investigating rival cartels and intelligence agencies that might have capabilities necessary to conduct such an operation. Ricardo's manhunt reached international scope when his investigators discovered evidence suggesting Miguel had fled to Mexico using false documentation. Ricardo activated his contacts within Mexican law enforcement and began coordinating with criminal organizations throughout Central America to expand the search. The international manhunt included surveillance of border crossings, monitoring of financial transactions, and infiltration of immigrant communities where Miguel might seek refuge. Ricardo offered substantial rewards for information leading to Miguel's capture and threatened severe consequences for anyone providing assistance to the fugitive gardener. 6 months after Miguel vanished with $48 million in cartel money, the ripple effects of his theft were still reshaping the landscape of organized crime throughout the American Southwest. Ricardo's organization had suffered losses extending far beyond the missing money, as the theft had exposed vulnerabilities and triggered investigations threatening the survival of the entire criminal enterprise. The immediate consequence was collapse of several major money laundering operations Ricardo had spent years developing. Exposure of the underground vault forced Ricardo to abandon sophisticated financial networks and relocate operations to less secure facilities, vulnerable to law enforcement surveillance and rival criminal organizations. Ricardo's loss of his secure storage facility also disrupted the cartel's ability to process cash from drug sales and human trafficking operations. The organization was forced to use alternative storage methods that were more expensive and less reliable, reducing profit margins and creating operational inefficiencies, affecting their competitiveness against rival groups. The corruption network Ricardo had carefully constructed over many years began to unravel as compromised officials became concerned about their exposure and began seeking ways to protect themselves from prosecution. Several corrupted law enforcement officers requested transfers to different jurisdictions, while others began providing information to internal affairs investigators in exchange for immunity. The investigation into Miguel's theft inadvertently revealed evidence of criminal activities extending far beyond the original robbery. Federal agencies discovered financial records, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage documenting extensive cartel operations and official corruption throughout Southern California. The federal investigation triggered by Miguel's theft resulted in over 30 arrests and seizure of assets worth more than $200 million. The investigation also led to resignation or dismissal of dozens of corrupted officials and implementation of new security protocols designed to prevent similar infiltration of law enforcement agencies. Ricardo's position within the cartel hierarchy was severely damaged by his failure to protect the organization's assets and maintain operational security. Ricardo's superiors began questioning his judgment and competence, and there were rumors he would be replaced or eliminated if he couldn't recover the stolen money and restore confidence in his leadership. The pressure from cartel leadership forced Ricardo to take increasingly desperate measures to demonstrate his continued value to the organization. Ricardo launched violent attacks against rival groups he suspected of involvement in the theft, triggering a war that disrupted criminal operations throughout the region and attracted unwanted law enforcement attention. The theft also had profound effects on the estate where Miguel had worked as a gardener for 2 years. The property was abandoned by Ricardo after discovery of the underground vault, and the elaborate gardens Miguel had carefully maintained began to deteriorate without proper care and maintenance. Isabela Santos, Miguel's daughter, became an unwitting casualty of her father's crime as she found herself under constant surveillance by both law enforcement agencies and cartel operatives. Isabela's therapy sessions were monitored, her communications were intercepted, and her daily activities were tracked by people who hoped Miguel would attempt to contact her. The federal investigation into Miguel's theft also revealed sophisticated methods he had used to plan and execute his crime. Investigators discovered Miguel had spent months studying security systems, researching money laundering techniques, and developing false identities that allowed him to disappear completely. Law enforcement agencies began studying Miguel's methods to improve their own capabilities for investigating organized crime and to develop countermeasures preventing similar thefts in the future. Miguel's techniques became the subject of training programs and academic research aimed at understanding how individual criminals could challenge powerful criminal organizations. Ricardo Montoya's organization never fully recovered from the losses and disruptions caused by Miguel's theft. The organization was eventually absorbed by rival groups or dismantled by law enforcement agencies that had gained valuable intelligence from the investigation into the missing $48 million.